A Fox News alert, President Trump and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, wrapping up their meeting after more than 2 hours, much longer than it was expected to go. Right now, Rex Tillerson is briefing reporters about that meeting. The biggest headline is that President Trump reportedly brought up Russian meddling in the U.S. election right off the bat. Putin flatly denies that. We're also hearing about a partial Syria ceasefire. There's a lot to talk about with Alex Kliment, an expert on Russia, global research director as well at the Eurasia Group. I guess it should be no surprise that the two men disagree over whether or not election meddling came up.
That's certainly right. I mean, going into this meeting, Trump was in a very difficult position domestically with respect to the Russia question. If he was seen as being too nice to Russia, it would inflame the politics of the Russia investigation. But if he brought up the Russian meddling issue and really pushed it too hard, he risked delegitimizing his own election, right? So he was on this very sort of narrow path. It's interesting to see that the narratives from the Russian side and the American side, you know, are not totally divergent, but are starting to hit a fork in the road. We'll have to see over the next few hours what the different readouts say.
It's no surprise, obviously, that the Russians would like to meddle with the election, but so far nobody's brought forward any evidence suggesting that, you know, that they've changed votes, changed the result.
Yeah, well, of course, I think the focus is mainly on whether there was involvement in shaping voters' perceptions before they went into the urns. But of course, as you said, there's a wide divergence on what the threshold of evidence is and who believes it and who doesn't. Several intelligence agencies, as you know, think that it happened, so that's what we go on.
It has been described that this meeting is kind of a win-win for Vladimir Putin. If he comes away with nothing, he can say, well, look, Donald Trump is a weak president and he's under fire and under investigation. But if he comes away with some kind of an agreement on Syria or anything else, he says, look what I got for the Russian people.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Putin went into this in a much stronger position, again, vis-a-vis his own domestic constituency, right? If he gets something from Putin, it's, look, we made the U.S. blink. And if he doesn't, if he gets something from Trump, rather, Putin always gets something from Putin. If he gets something from Trump, it makes it look like he had the U.S. president blink. If he doesn't, Putin can always go back very easily to a familiar narrative, which is that the United States just doesn't treat Russia fairly, and that plays very well at home. So if Trump plays tough, Putin can go back to that role.
Talk about that, because I think a lot of people don't understand the manipulation of the Russian media and frankly, state control of a lot of the Russian media. Vladimir Putin, you know, based on his KGB experience, is a master at manipulating public perception, right? And what's he going to go home to his people and say about this event?
Well, as you say, I mean, the Russian government controls most of, certainly the television media, which is how most Russians get their news. It is true that Putin has played up this narrative of a Russia sort of treated unfairly by the West, but that feeling predates Putin, right? The experience of many Russians throughout the 1990s and even early 2000s was that the West had treated Russia unfairly, had encircled Russia with NATO allies, all these things. That does strike a chord with Russian people, irrespective of the fact that, of course, the government is controlling the media space. So there's a little more there than just manipulation of the media. It's a very strongly and keenly felt thing amongst many Russians. Can
the two sides, that is the U.S. and Russia, come to an agreement in Syria that would make sense? I mean, the Russians are not going to allow anything that would dethrone, in effect, Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah, well, you know, the United States has largely come around to the reality that Assad is not going to leave power. I think one of the big questions now, and there's news that there's been an agreement on what's called the de-escalation zone in southwestern Syria. The big question is, can the Iranians be brought on board with this, right? The Russians and the Americans can agree on a certain sector of de-escalation, but there's a lot of Iranian actors in Syria, both directly and indirectly through Hezbollah, that will have to be party to an agreement. The U.S. doesn't want to talk to the Iranians. They just want to talk to the Russians, and that's a dangerous proxy relationship.
One of the difficulties for Putin in this discussion is Donald Trump can be unpredictable.
Extremely unpredictable. I mean, when Putin goes home, he's got two problems. One, can he believe any commitments that Trump makes? And two, how constrained is Trump really by the institution? I mean, Congress has really turned against Trump on the Russia issue. You probably know Congress is voting to legislate the executive sanctions that are currently on Russia to make it difficult for the White House to give relief in any way to Russia on sanctions.
Fascinating stuff ahead. Alex Kliment from the Eurasia Group. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.